And what do you think is the power of changing other people's inner beliefs?
I think that's a great question, Corey. I think changing people's inner beliefs, I guess it gives them that sense of looking at it from a confidence perspective. You can't lack it. You can lose it, and we all get there at times. It's just a different perception towards it, and it's getting to get them to reaffirm that inner belief, and in a sense, obviously promote their confidence by questioning, obviously, external factors from other people saying they I can't do this, can't do that. And then obviously you have that on repeat so many times, you start to believe that yourself. So this negative thing I'm telling myself, I think it's total crap or total BS. It's like, I don't believe it. It's not true. Let me go out there and not necessarily prove somebody wrong, but have that notion and get up and go and say, well, I'm going to do it for me. I'm going to do it anyway kind of mentality.
Welcome to the Unleash Success Podcast, where we break down the secrets of success to give you real tools and strategies that get real results. And now, here's your host, Corey Corpodian.
Welcome back to Unleash Success. If you haven't subscribed to our newsletter yet, just go to unleashsuccess.com, enter your email so you can get all the tools and strategies sent directly to you each and every week. Today, we have the privilege of interviewing James Roberts, who is a Paralympic athlete who has competed for over a decade. He's represented Great Britain at countless world championships in volleyball, rowing, and also participated in 2 Paralympic Games, Beijing 2008 and London in 2012. He is an elite athlete and competitor, and today he's going to talk to us about the mindset that he had to overcome despite being born with femoral dysplasia, which literally means he does not have a femur bone. James, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Corey, it's my absolute pleasure.
Can you describe to people exactly what you were born with? Because for people to visualize what it means to be born without a femoral bone, what it means to not really have the thigh is pretty hard, and yet you are an elite athlete.
It's quite difficult to put into words, and we discussed this off air. In terms of to visualize it, it's quite hard to describe, but to kind of put it into a little bit of a context and for people to get a little bit of an idea, like you said in the introduction, I don't have a femur bone. I've got a small tibia and fibula, which in a sense is the lower portion of the leg, so very much in the calf. So that's the sense of what makes up my leg. So it's the bottom proportion of the leg, and then that's attached to the hip.
So it's almost like if you were to compare it to your right leg, your right leg is a normal size, and then your left leg is half the size. Is that correct?
Yeah, that'd be the easiest way of explaining it, and people get a little bit of a better visualization and a better picture of being able to envision what it looks like. That's why I use the simple term of saying it's similar to an amputee, because in a sense, from a component perspective, I've got prosthetic leg. So most people will have encountered somebody, maybe not passing in the street, but everybody knows what an amputation looks like, knows what a prosthetic limb looks like nowadays.
Absolutely. So when you were growing up, did you always know that you wanted to be an athlete? A lot of people sometimes have issues. Maybe they are an amputee listening to this. Maybe they have some, physical thing that they were born with similar to you, or maybe it's just something in their head. Like, how did you decide that you were going to become an athlete and say, I'm not going to worry about what this is. I'm going to just step up and kind of be the best me that I want to be?
That's a good question, Corey. I think to envision where I obviously eventually wound up, that was probably way outside of the remit and actually out of my wildest dreams that they would actually come true. And I'll be honest with that. I think, but kind of going back to the early days, I was very sporty anyway. So to even be given that opportunity to have that as a career, I was gonna jump at it. It wasn't until I was probably in my teens that the actual reality dawned on me. It could be a career, but I was surrounded by people of like-minded as I was. You could say it was a passion. Maybe I'd go as far as maybe an obsession with sport, but I think people of that nature that are very competitive, very sport-oriented, think like that anyway. So that they are going to kind of put all their eggs into one basket, so to speak, and try and make that into reality. But I just really, I think if I go deep enough, I did it for the love of the sport. So it was always a case of, well, if it's fun, the enjoyment's going to be there. And then as long as I have that, as I progress up the ladder, I'm not far way removed from when I was a child. So I think I maybe have lost that later on in my career, and that's maybe why it became difficult. But I think the actual early days of it was down to that, and that alone. It was the enjoyment factor, being involved in something that I enjoyed, and being able to do it with my friends.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely, when you're around supportive people, it can help a lot. You know, a lot of people say you're the result of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And so if you're around people who support you and are competitive and like-minded, you know, they're going to push you. But I got to imagine that somebody along the line probably said, no, you know, you can't do this, or try to, you know, maybe dissuade you from going into becoming an athlete. And how would you overcome somebody saying that to you, especially as a young kid? That's got to be pretty tough.
I don't think I ever got a no. I think the only one that I could relate to that actual question, Corey, I'd have been 15 or 16. And I wasn't very heavily involved in able-bodied sport until I was that age. And I had a coach come up to me and said, have you ever thought about doing disability sport? And I was kind of taken back by the comments, like, what? Why would I want to do that? I know within reason I could compete among my peers from an able-bodied perspective. I knew I was at a slight disadvantage, but I'm thinking, what? Why would I think because there was that illusion, and we're talking about in the early 2000s, the Paralympic movement is not what it is almost 20 years later now, as I speak to you. And I've got utmost respect for it, probably more so now. And it obviously allowed me to have a career in it, but it wasn't in the wider media as much as it is today. I think that's probably the case in the UK. I can't say that argument for most of the world. It's probably, they are a few years behind us in terms of maybe that acceptance and the sense of it being parallel to the Olympics. That's still going to be a long way to come and get people to look at it from a mindset perspective, as at the end of the day, be it an Olympic athlete or a Paralympic athlete, they were still an athlete, and the mindset to be able to do that day in, day out is somewhat fortitude, a mindset to, in a sense, want to wreck your body day in, day out. It's kind of lunacy and kind of crazy in one category or another. But I think, to kind of come back to my point, it was only that. I took on board what they said, but if they had never said it, we never know where I might not be one for starters, not speaking to you, and I might have not had the sporting career that I had if I hadn't had a question or a statement come from left field and kind of take me out of my comfort zone in terms of within the confines of what able sport, that I was within. So it was out of my comfort zone and giving me a sense of being able to be in a different community and then obviously thus succeed in it. Okay, I didn't know at the time, 10, 15 years later, I'd have had the accolades that I achieved, but I was willing to give it a shot. after I think probably let my pride and my ego to put it to one side and say, okay, what they say, they have a certain level of conviction, and it is probably a good question to ask. So, okay, once I put those two things aside and went, well, how do I go about being able to make that a reality and ask the right people? I think it was about 6 months later before I actually did anything with it. And once my season had finished with the team I was at out in Belgium with both my parents being on in the military, it was a military-based team that was out of the way, and I moved on to disability sport. It's kind of the building blocks for where the career went to.
Really interesting that you kind of, even though you had a physical disability, you were always playing sports just like everybody else. And when they actually approached you about it, I kind of love this mindset. You're like, wait, why? You know, like, why would I want to? I can do this. And I'm just curious, like, not a lot of people have that kind of level of confidence in themselves. Where do you think that came from as you were growing up?
I think that's come from my mother, because it probably stems from my early childhood with my disability. Because, okay, my mum knew from the scan that I was going to have a disability, but they kind of said, well, let's not tell him and get him from a mindset that, okay, this is the hand I've been dealt with. Okay, it's like probably took a little bit longer to crawl, a little bit longer to walk, but I found an adaptation to suit me and a model that would work for me. Okay, here's a problem. Let me come up with a solution. And I've been very much like that throughout big proportions of my life. Well, okay, this is a problem. How do I overcome this hurdle, this wall that's in my way? Do I go around it? Do I go under it? Do I go over it, or it's probably from sport. Do I go full head first and go through it? So right. I think it's that mindset of, well, let me come up with a solution to where I'm facing. And I've had those little hurdles from elementary school. It'd be this place be the simplicity of it was just in the playground watching my friends and peers playing on the monkey bars, and this is only hearsay because I have no recollection of it whatsoever. My mum saying to me, you were sat on the side watching, but you could see the cogs figurative moving inside my head. Well, how can I figure out to be able to make this adverse situation that I'm into that I'm adaptable and being able to overcome it and be playing among my friends. And I think within a couple of days, I'd figure out a solution to be able to do that. And that's a simple task. So I think it's over the years, they've got more and more difficult, but I've always had that actual resolution to the fact that, well, you're going to come up with a solution. It's just going to be maybe out to left center field. It's going to be something that is completely maybe abnormal to everybody else, but it's going to work for you.
I love that. I think that the simple fact that, I mean, like your parents, they didn't say, oh, you have a disability. They didn't say, oh, we need to kind of comfort you and try and do this, but they're like, let's just let him figure it out. And then you've adopted this philosophy that's, through life, just if there's a problem, I'm going to find a solution. And it's amazing how when people believe that, when you think that way, it's amazing how most of those people end up finding solutions, right? There's a problem and they always seem to be able to find a solution. And I think that's just a really good habit that we should all get into. With being a competitive athlete, you talked about the mindset of an athlete and what it takes, the grueling just practices and hours of work to be a competitive elite athlete. What are some of the things that you did to stay motivated when, during your 10-year career, and some daily habits that you have to really strengthen your mindset so you didn't just give up when it got tough?
I think it depended on the sport. I think very much in my early days, I was very much of using extrovert motivation, so an outside source to motivate me. So be other peers, beating other people, very much ego driven to want to beat people. Whereas I think you'll get away with that to a certain extent to be able to keep yourself motivated. But I think it's very much using the two to your benefit. So obviously it's going to help that you've got an intrinsic motivator because you want to do it. So I think as I progress up the ladder, it was very much like you said early on in the episode, having the people around you to support you. Once you've got people in the corner, in your corner, fighting for you, that internal belief is actually tenfold, because it's like, well, I believe it. Somebody else believes I can achieve it. Let me keep going. So I think because it was a passion and at times an obsession, I wanted to become an athlete. I wanted to, once I'd achieved the stage of getting into development teams within Great Britain, it's like, okay, this is nice. I like how this feels. Being able to wear a tracksuit from time to time with your national emblem on it. Okay, let me get to the next stage and go from that. So once, it was the time period is not that long, but I think it'd be a space of 3 years between development and then making a performance team. I made my first world champs in 2006. Oh, I like this. I want more of it. And I think it kind of gives you that sense of, what's the word I want to use? Gratification on one hand, but that kind of hunger for wanting a little bit more. I like a piece of this. I want more of it. So I think the idea, like that piece of cake, oh, it's sweet. I want more of it. And I think, I think from that, it stems, okay, I've done the World Championships. Let me see if I can't get to the pinnacle of Paralympic sport and make the Paralympics. And I managed to achieve that in 2008. And I think once that had finished as a games, you're thinking, what do I do next? I want to do another one. So I think it does drive you towards the next 4 years. But I think the time in between, you do have to backtrack a little bit. And okay, the end result is to make a games. Okay, not everybody has that luxury of actually getting there. They might have a stumble, be it year 1, year 2, year 3. The unlucky ones will be stumble at the last hurdle. But I think it's looking at the simplicity, and this is where athletes probably go wrong. And I won't generalize, and I'll use myself as an example. We look at that end result of, be it the major championships, and make them to be the pinnacle, but we lose sight of the process. We think of it as due course. It's not a big deal, and I think this is maybe where I think you could use it as an exploit to success, is giving yourself gratification for even the little things in the little wins in life. Because an athlete, not necessarily they don't do it because we don't think of the magnitude of those little wins every day. We just think of it part and parcel, of the grind. It's a necessity. If I want to get from A to B, I have to do it, no matter how hard it's going to be, how easy the session might be. I have to do it. Whereas I think if we took a step back and maybe look at it from where I'm at now as a coach, and actually gave a kind of a pat on the back to each individual, well, you've managed to overcome, in simple terms, something that not everybody would want to do to themselves. So that is a win. So you do that day in, day out, you are one step closer to getting to your overall result.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you said so many great things there, but one of the things about ego, how that, like, trying to prove everybody wrong can work for, a while. But eventually, that kind of runs out. And kind of what you said, paralleling with gratitude and appreciating the small wins on a daily basis. as opposed to, always shooting for the goal. Because once you get that goal, once you get that championship, once you become the best, well, then it's like, well, now what? Do it again and again. But it's this kind of constant, if you don't have something bigger driving you, doesn't have the same impact that you thought it was going to be. And so you end up spending all that time in the process, not even enjoying it. And I think finding a way to enjoy the process is absolutely a very powerful motivator. So one thing I want to kind of switch gears with, playing like a champion and doing what you've done, but at the same time, being an elite athlete and overcoming all these things and becoming successful, you still you've got this, physical deformity. And I know that some of the things you talk about, just kind of like having confidence in yourself. Has that ever played a role in confidence? Like, are you trying to prove people that you can do it? Or have you ever had any issues with that? I'm just wondering from a perspective of mindset, just how do you overcome this kind of physical disability just in everyday life?
I think maybe in the early days, because I think everybody's like that. It's always when I think, be it if somebody says no to you, you can't do this, you can't do that. I think it gives you a chip on your shoulders. I think in simple terms, Corey, probably yes. It's like, well, okay, I'm going to go out and prove you wrong. Whereas I think maybe this sense of confidence probably arose more specifically, I think, I don't know what I'd be in my junior year of high school. I was having body confidence issues with myself. And it still perplexes me to this day because I wouldn't wear shorts. And as I'm speaking to you, it's obviously sunny where I'm at. And I would assume the same with you, it being in California. I wouldn't do it to go to school, but I would wear shorts to do PE, which makes no sense whatsoever. But I think it's that sense of, because I'm in a space that's comforting to me, being in a sporting arena, that's where I, to some extent, excel. So I'm going to be exuberant and full of confidence. Whereas maybe in the other spaces, but in school, I wasn't, maybe less so, maybe because everybody's going to come over, have their forms of adversity in their high school years, maybe later, maybe earlier, in terms of how they overcome. So I think maybe once I overcame that and was very competent and very confident within myself and who I wasn't afraid to, a sense, be who I wanted to be. So if you didn't like me, that's fine. If you do, I was probably, and still am to a certain extent, very much a people pleaser, whereas I need to take a step back at times and say, well, you can't please everybody. Somebody's going to hate you for one sort or the other, for be it success. You may be doing slightly better than they are. And you just have to accept that, because not everybody's going to resonate with you as a person, and you just have to accept that. So I think in a nutshell, it would be one of those 2-3 factors that actually enabled me to push on and strive to be confident with myself to push on in that sporting realm.
James, you've changed some of your beliefs and your inner beliefs a little bit over the years. And what do you think is the power of changing other people's inner beliefs?
I think that's a great question, Corey. I think changing people's inner beliefs, I guess it gives them that sense of looking at it from a confidence perspective. You can't lack it. You can lose it, and we all get there at times. It's just a different perception towards it, and it's getting to get them to reaffirm that inner belief, and in a sense, obviously promote their confidence by questioning, obviously, external factors from other people saying they I can't do this, can't do that. And then obviously you have that on repeat so many times, you start to believe that yourself. So once you get them to question that from an outside perspective, but when it does arise, they're able to question it themselves. Well, I don't believe with what I'm saying to myself, be it I can't do this, I don't want to do this today, and all that negative self-talk. You get to a position where, because you're in a state of confidence within yourself, you're able to fight back against that notion of kind of like an inner demon, so to speak, or that battle between the angel and devil on your shoulder, and kind of telling you, well, you should do this, you should do that. But I think once you get into a state of being aware and being very much confident in your ability to say, well, this negative thing I'm telling myself, I think it's total crap or total BS. It's like, I don't believe it. It's not true. Let me go out there and not necessarily prove somebody wrong, but have that notion and get up and go and say, well, I'm going to do it for me. I'm going to do it anyway, kind of mentality.
I love it. James, do you have a quick story from your own life where you changed a belief and how that made you feel better or more confident?
6 months ago, I was in a well, not a bad place, but a dark place where I was feeling very down, probably because of work and things like that. Because I'd gone back into full-time employment because business wasn't doing very well, and because I was surrounded in that kind of environment where it's very toxic, very negative, I started to believe that myself. So I was taking on their problems and kind of dwelling on the fact, and then feeling very much a victim and say, oh, my health's gone down the toilet, and not looking at that's something that's actually been progressing slowly but surely. I think I kind of got to the end road and said, well, through talk and through going to counseling and things like that, I slowly got out of that vicious circle and started pushing back. On the one hand, disrespectful and things like that. I don't believe that. You might be able to say that to me, but I don't believe that to be true. And be able to push back to a certain extent. Whereas maybe 6 months prior, I would just take it on the chin and absorb it. Whereas I was confident in myself as I grew. Well, you're not going to speak to me like that because I don't speak to myself like that. So I think it's very much having that notion of inner confidence where you're able to push back on the one hand and say, well, if I'm not going to speak to myself like that, nobody else is sure as hell isn't.
Absolutely. You know, a lot of athletes that I've talked to typically have a morning or an evening routine that they do that sets them up for the day, or, you know, some people even have evening routines where they set themselves up for the next day. I'm curious, what is something you've done that on a pretty daily basis that you think has really helped your performance?
I think it differs, because when I was an athlete, and I actually didn't make a big deal about it back then. I think I did once I stopped doing it 6 months ago, because I saw what happened. And it was down to the fact of just listening to music. That was the routine that I had, not necessarily morning or evening routine, but it was I could use it as a motivator, an inspirator, and just a chance to wind down from the daily hustle of sport, education, and you name it. And just once I actually sat down, more recently, and actually listened to some of those lyrics of music that I listened to probably as a teenager and still to a certain extent do now, you're thinking, okay, they have a different meaning to me now to back then. But you're thinking how powerful that is as a vehicle of positivity to drive you forward from a sense of, you could say, in one sense, a form of unconscious brainwashing, and you doing it for actually betterment of yourself to because you're in that positive frame of mind, to kind of amplify it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I was going to ask you, just with positive thinking and positive talk, I feel like a lot of athletes, I've even read some research about this, like with baseball players, how they have this incredible positive self-talk that helps them overcome the fact that, a successful baseball career is when they only hit 30% of the balls thrown at them, which in any other arena would be just complete failure to fail 70% of the time, right? So I was curious, when you're listening to this music or these inspirational talks, what is some like common positive self-talk that you would use or hear yourself say to yourself that helped kept you motivated and driving forward?
Well, I think because as an athlete, you have a lot of not necessarily a lot of downtime, but when you aren't in education or you aren't training, you got that downtime. So it'd be probably more specifically on training camp is an easier explanation to. So we'll watch, I don't know, what were some of the films back then? Cool Runnings will probably spring to mind. That's a massive one with self-talk and affirmation within, if anybody has not seen it.
Hilarious movie, by the way. I love that movie.
with Junior and it was the big dude doing it in the bathroom in the bar. That's affirmation and self-talk right there in the flesh. And I think I used that a few months ago, but I don't necessarily have to do it to look in the mirror. I can envision that actual scene in my head and do it from that perspective. And you can kind of get the endorphins flowing straight away just by thinking about it. Just by, what does he say? I see power, I see pride, I see a bad mother. And that actually motivates you because it's thinking, I've got that confidence within myself. Well, I'm strong. I've got a pride within myself. So why can't I achieve something?
I love it. Yeah. I use different, you hear something in a movie or a song and it rings true to you. And I'm big on constant repetition, especially when it comes to that kind of thing, because what we don't realize is that sometimes the negative self-talk will be on constant repeat in our heads if we're not actively putting positive self-talk in it. And it's not like positive thinking BS. It actually changes the way we respond, the actions we take, and therefore the results we get. So I love that Cool Runnings clip. That's great, man. Shifting gears a little bit, you host a Mindset Athlete podcast. I'm curious what you've seen from interviewing other people and like-minded individuals. What do you think, including yourself, is one of the biggest characteristics that athletes share that get them to this elite level?
I think deep down it's that unquestionable confidence. It's that they do not care to a certain extent what other people think, because I think what I've seen on YouTube, to probably answer your question more specifically, Corey, is when you have a news reporter ask an athlete, were you ever nervous? Well, that never ever actually enters the mindset of an athlete's psyche. It's like, well, why would I be nervous? I'm doing something I enjoy. Be it if you get to the heights of your sport, be it Super Bowl, NBA Finals, World Series, to kind of use the terms of the US sports, why would you be nervous? You've made the pinnacle. That the notion of being nervous, well, physiologically, it's the same response as being excited. So an athlete would be full of ecstasy, excitement, to be able to have that opportunity to be able to play at the heights of the pinnacle of their game. So, okay, there is a sense of nervousness, but to say it's outside of oneself, you might think it, you might have that little inclination of self-doubt. I'm not saying that, but you kind of dismiss it straight away because, like you were saying, once it enters your mindset, you start to believe it. So if I don't think of the what ifs at all, and I think of being humble and being able to be in that position in the first place, what have I got to be fearful of?
Absolutely. It's interesting. I talk a lot about emotional fitness, and I think a lot of different emotions come up from time to time. When I was in high school sports, and even just in high school and academics, I would experience stress, but it never felt like debilitating stress for me. It was always kind of like a pressure cooker. I would always say I'd do better under pressure, and would somehow excel or make whatever I needed to do happen, and that was I got a lot of enjoyment out of that because I would find success in it. But as I got older, that pressure, that stress kind of, I felt like I lost control of it, and it turned to anxiety a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I had to think back to when I was actually an athlete. And I remember going, man, when I was an athlete, sure, you got butterflies before the game, right before the tip off or the kickoff. I played basketball and football in high school. And so you had those butterflies, a sense of nervousness, but it was almost like the energy converted, like you said, into excitement, into, like this, sure, butterflies, but the minute it starts, it's like, it's go time, because you can't let that enter your psyche, because if you do, then all of a sudden you're gonna be second guessing everything you're doing on the court. And that wasn't something that, you just couldn't do if you wanted to be the best. And later on in life, in business, and it's different, but there's a lot of similarities around mental, emotional capabilities. And the minute I let that out of my control, it became anxiety. When I turned it back into, hey, this stress is good. This motivates me. It's a pressure cooker. This is how diamonds are formed, right? I thought I'll succeed under this pressure, and let me motivate it. Let me allow it to motivate me to act. Boom. Everything changed. I felt less stress. And because if you want to be at the elite level in sports or in business, you can't let this negative emotional feeling enter your psyche and not turn it into something positive, because if not, it becomes debilitating. So absolutely, 100% agree and completely love that. And speaking of just like what would be debilitating, you're a coach for athletes. What are some of the things that you see in other athletes where you're, hey, look, I want to help you overcome this. What are things that stop people, and how do you overcome that? What's one of the biggest things you see stopping, young athletes or people that want success, and how do you help them overcome it?
I would think it comes down to what you echoed there. It's over thinking probably the simplest things in terms of probably from an idea to Facebook Live today on it. I think people probably overcomplicate, be it training, nutrition, and probably from one facet, probably the mindset, if you encompass them all, because they're thinking we've got that kind of mindset as a society. Well, I want it now. I want a quick fix, but nothing that is let me rephrase that. Nothing that you want comes easy, so it's going to take time. So if you have that now to be able to accept that and kind of withstand the naysayers, your own ego, you overthinking and magnifying things in a negative light because you're thinking, well, what's such and such going to think of this? Who's going to think about that? And to actually come back to the internal motivator that got you there in the first place and kind of get you to think of it, taking it one step at a time and kind of having this ethos of controlling the controllables, and the uncontrollables will take care of themselves, and having that mindset as opposed to thinking, oh, if I do this, I do that, what's somebody going to think about it? It never actually gets off the ground. You're never going to get anywhere. So it's having, like I said, with controlling what you've got control of and taking each step at a time and making little inroads to get you where you want to go. So it's in terms of, if we look at it from a nutritional perspective, it's changing those habits over a course of a time period. So be that the old saying is you make a habit or a behavior change in 21 days. Well, that's not realistic. It's going to take us slightly longer than that. It's more like 66 days. But if you have the willingness to do the small stuff day in, day out, the closer you get to those 66 days, the easier it becomes. It's because you don't think about it. You just do it instinctively. It's because you've took the time out to make it a habit. You instinctively don't need to. It comes like some subconscious nature that you do it, and you don't really need to think about it anymore. So be it the notion that I do, I think, well, I've been doing meditation for 6 months as we speak. In the early days, it was difficult. I don't even think about it nowadays. I just do it instinctively. So I think it's coming down to that. If you do it, take it a step-by-step approach, it gets to a point where you don't really have to think about it at all.
Absolutely. Shifting habits in the beginning, like you said, takes a lot of energy, but eventually it just becomes a habit and you do it without even thinking. Talking about overthinking certain actions that we need to take. And I always think action is the cure. And so one thing we talk about here is the Pareto principle. And the way I apply that is 80% of our results come from 20% of our actions. The key is just knowing which actions we should take. And for you, from a mindset perspective or a goal achievement perspective, because you're somebody who constantly has been motivated and pushing for years to come, and now you're spreading this around. What do you think is the biggest action we can take to increase our mental success in the future?
That's a good question, Corey. For success, I think it's positivity. It's been very much, we're in a society that to a certain extent wants to belittle, begrudge each other. But if we did it on the flip side and we're a little bit more positive and look to actually give somebody a helping hand up, I think everybody would be a lot happier. And obviously it's a sense of, okay, it's only human nature to be envious and jealous on the one hand. But if you looked at it from a positive perspective and actually looked, well, why are they succeeding? And actually looked at it internally, well, what are you doing? Not necessarily wrong, but what are you not doing that they are possibly doing? And you look to, in a sense, emulate it, not necessarily copy it, and put it into your own, not remit, but in terms of your own story, you're going to be a lot more happy instead of trying to belittle, begrudge, trying to tear somebody down. Nobody wins in that perspective of thinking.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that spreading positivity can only help spread more positivity. And it's unfortunate, like you said, nowadays a lot of people do belittle or judge others, and instead of helping bring back up other people. And it's like, think about this. If you spend all your time worrying or complaining about somebody else, that's just less time that you can actually focus on making yourself better. So from that perspective alone, that's a huge bonus. And I think a lot of people hear that, but need to be reminded about it and its importance. So thank you. So James, this has been great. Love getting to know you and your mindset. You're absolutely a huge competitor, and I can hear it just in your daily actions and everything. And what you believe is just incredible. From somebody who I really respect the mindset that it takes to be an elite athlete and someone who's successful in the world. So thank you. Where can we find you online?
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at James O. Roberts 11. Like you said in the introduction, I have my own podcast, which is The Mindset Athlete, which you can find on Apple Podcasts, formerly iTunes, Spotify, and anywhere that you listen to a podcast, you could find my show there.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. And, James, you've had an amazing career and become an elite athlete, but I always believe there's another level of success. So for you, what is that next level of success?
Corey, for me, the next level of success is to get people to really challenge their inner beliefs and be it if they are thinking positively, how can they expand on that or if you're in the mindset of you are kind of questioning yourself and kind of thinking, well, things aren't going right for myself, but trying to get them to change their belief system in terms of, well, it's going to happen one day at a time. It's having that 1% will change each day. You do that every day, like we said in the episode, you're going to succeed. You're getting to 1%. You're bettering yourself a little bit at a time. And like we said, it takes time to make improvements. But if you're willing to put in the effort to change, you're going to get there and succeed. But I think to kind of come to my point, and for me, it's going to the next level and going beyond the realms of podcasting. I've got in the pipeline a course that I've joined to do a TEDx talk in the near future. So that is on the cards for me. So onto bigger and better things and to probably, and like I say, spread my message of out there a little bit more.
James, that's awesome. Well, I wish you good luck with TEDx, and definitely let me know when it comes on. And I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Oh, Corey, the pleasure has been absolutely mine.
If you enjoyed the show and learned something of value, the one ask that I have is please go subscribe, whether you're on iTunes, Spotify, or YouTube. And if you leave us a 5-star rating or review, that absolutely helps us get our message out there. Each week, I'm going to continue to interview amazing people, and we're going to break down their tools and strategies to help get you real results. Feel free to visit the website, unleashsuccess.com, and subscribe to our newsletter so you get updates each week. And remember, knowing is not enough. Knowledge alone is not power. Action is. Because action is the only way you're going to get the results you want in life and truly live the life of your dreams. So take some action, subscribe to the podcast today, and get ready to unleash success in you.